Alright, so at this point we've got our crossbow base shape all modeled out. We've got our bow, our track, our shape, and our trigger. Pretty much all the basic stuff that a crossbow actually needs to function. Now we're going to go ahead and add some details to it, like maybe a grip wrap around this part of the handle here, and I think a leather wrap might be kind of cool, some kind of leather wrap around the stock. We're also going to need a like a little metal piece right here, that kind of a ring that kind of comes down and loops back around. And maybe even like a little wrap that goes from the actual bow part of the crossbow right here to the actual shape of the wood on the crossbow. That might be nice to mask the transition from the wood to the bow. So let's get started with that. To do that, we're going to start out with a cube. So Shift A, Mesh, Cube. All right. And now we're going to get rid of this face and this face here by tabbing into our edit mode, hit face, get rid of this guy, get rid of this guy. And now we're going to add some edge loops here, all right? All the way around, just like that. And now let's round out this box shape here, almost like a cylinder. Okay, select all these edges. Now let's use our 2-sphere tool. So Shift Alt S, round it out, and now you can see that that messed with the size of these edges here. We don't want them to be different sizes like that, so we're just going to scale it on the y-axis. Scale Y to. Oops, that's not what we wanted to do. We want to select these edges here. Scale them on the y-axis. Scale Y, oops, on their local y-axis. So scale Y, Y? Nope, that's not going to work either. So the reason that's happening is because it's scaling from the medium point. We want individual origins here. Scale Y. Now that's completely flat. All right. It looks like it's not quite round though. It's still a little boxy. So let's select everything. You know what? Let's just select these edges here. I think this might work. Select these guys and switch back to our median point here. So we're scaling from the center of the box. Then we're going to scale it on everything except for the y-axis. So scale, Shift, Y. All right, bring those guys in, and that's a bit more round. All right. That looks pretty good. Now we're going to scale it everything on the y-axis. So scale Y, bring it in to this to make this kind of shape here, and this would be good for one ring of our grip object here. Okay, so we're going to scale the whole thing down. All right. Now we're going to move it over. So G, Y, and get it to about the right position. All right. Easy. Bring this guy down. Rotate it on the x-axis, so it's going at about the right angle. Scale it down a bit more. All right, GY, bring it up. All right. Now we're going to want to add a subdivision here, subdivision surface. So modifier, subdivision surface, and then we're going to want to shrink wrap it. So add modifier. Shrink wrap right here, and then we're going to want to set our target to our crossbow body. All right, and that's going to conform this shape to the actual body of this crossbow, to this mesh right here. Okay, and now we want to kind of make sure it doesn't snap to that face. We want to make sure it snaps to just this area here. So what we're going to do is we're going to just move this guy. Let's select everything, hit G, Y, and maybe move it down a little bit, GZ. There we go. Just position it so that it doesn't snap to all those spaces up there. Now we're going to want to add a, you know what? I'm going to hit this little box here so that we can see the actual roundness of our geometry. I'm going to do the same thing for the shrink wrap there. And then we're going to add a, let's see, where is it at here? Solidify, there we go. And what that's going to do is it's going to make our completely flat geometry more 3D. So if we disable our crossbow body here, it'll make it easier to see. You can see that now it's got a thickness to it, right? So if I disable this, you can see it's just a flat piece of geometry. Enable it, now we've got a nice thickness going. Right now the offset's at negative, so that thickness, if we increase it, it's going to go more towards the center. But we want the opposite, so let's set our offset to 1 and not -1, all right? So now we've got our thickness going outward instead of inward, all right? Let's take a look at this. That doesn't look too bad. That actually looks very, very good. We can fix this part here a little bit later, but for now we're just going to leave that. All right, and we're going to basically duplicate this object a bunch of times and make sure they don't intersect with each other too much. Okay, let's rename it here to grip wrap. Let's just leave it at grip wrap. What is this cube object here? This shouldn't be named this. Let's see here. Oh, this is the bow. So let's rename that to bow. Bow. All right. Okay, so now let's go back to our grip wrap object. And you know what? I want to center this origin to the geometry. I don't like the origin being all the way over here. So let's right click, hit, let's see here. Set origin. Origin to geometry. That's going to center that origin there. Okay, so let's duplicate this object, create another grip wrap object, hit Shift D, all right? And I'm going to go into my side view mode so I don't have to worry about the x-axis. So to do that, I'm going to hit 3. I'm going to disable all of our reference objects here. That's what that giant pink thing was right there. I moved the reference image, so that's why it looks all pink like that. Okay, so now we've got our second grip object. We're going to move it, so let's hit G, move it down about like that. You know what, before I move it, I'm going to disable these buttons here, these little buttons. Alright, so I can see the actual object. Okay, let's place it right about there. I think that's a good position. All right, let's do the same thing. Let's just keep duplicating our objects. All right, and that looks pretty good for our placements here, I think. All right. Now I'm going to go through, I'm going to apply our modifiers and make a few modifications to the actual geometry here. Okay. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is we're going to want to click these boxes here on the solidify modifier. Okay, so we're going to want to hit even thickness, high quality normals. Okay, and that's going to create an even thickness all the way around this object here, so that when the object turns and the faces are at different angles, it doesn't thin out in some places and thicken in other places. All right, so now let's go ahead and apply these modifiers here. Apply, apply, apply. Okay, and I'm going to tab into my edit mode here, and we're going to fix stuff like this, okay, where the faces aren't quite perfect, and we just need to improve them just a little bit. All right, I'm going to select these faces here, well, just this one actually, and maybe hit GZ, move it on the Z axis. Actually, I think the X axis might be better for this one, so GX, this guy, now GZ, this guy like that. And do the same for this area here. GZ, like that, GX, right about there. Okay. That doesn't look too bad. Okay. And now we're going to go ahead and reduce the poly count a little bit wherever we can. So if we go to our edge select and we select this here and then we hit Control X, we can see it doesn't really hurt the look of it that much. So we're just going to remove edges that look like that. I don't know about that one. I think that one should stay. I think this one can go. Alright. It looks like that's reducing our poly count a good amount without hurting the shape of the actual object too much. You know what? We actually want to reduce the inside as well. Now that I look at it, we don't need these faces here. So we're just going to completely get rid of them. So hit X, faces, right? Okay, now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing for this next one, this next grip wrap object. So tab into our object mode, select this guy, tab back into our edit mode. Actually, never mind, we want to stay in our object mode. And then we want to apply these modifiers here. But remember, we got to hit these checkboxes here that we didn't hit earlier. So even thickness, high quality normals, and start applying our modifiers from the top down. Make sure you don't do from the bottom up. If you do from the bottom up like this, it'll have a different effect than what you want. All right. So make sure you go from the top down. All right. So let's go ahead and select this one's going to be a little different than the first one, because we want it to look like it's laying on top of this guy, right? So let's select this whole ridge right here, all right? And let's scale it, the entire thing. So just hit S, scale up, just so that it looks like it's right on top of this one right here, right? Let's see. We're going to want to move these edges down here a little bit. You know what? I don't think we even do. I think when we do our topology correction, or our topology reduction on this object, those edges are going to fix themselves and they're going to conform closer to this guy here. Maybe we should, no, it looks like it's just about perfect actually. So let's go ahead and do our topology reduction. First thing I'm going to do on this one is just reduce that inside. So select all the faces. Hit X, delete those faces. They're completely unneeded. So now let's go into our edge mode, get rid of this edge here. Yep, it went straight down where we wanted it to. Delete this edge here. This edge here is unnecessary. This one, unnecessary. I think that's good for that one. Now let's move on to the next one. Now let's hit those checkboxes, okay, and start applying our modifiers once again. And I think the one in front of it, this one here, I'm going to want to scale this edge up a little bit because you can see it's clipping through here as well. So let's hit S, scale it up, just so that it's not, so that the crossbow body isn't clipping through. Let's do the same for this one because I can see a little bit of clipping right there as well. Scale this part up. All right. Maybe move this edge out. I can see the piece underneath is clipping through right there. So let's just move that guy on the x-axis a bit. And just doing some tweaking here and there to make it look better than what we've already got. Doesn't look too bad already, but if it can be better, why not make it better, right? Okay, now let's fix the topology on this. Oh, no, you know what? We have to scale this guy a little bit as well. this edge loop. Let's scale that up. All right. Okay, and I think that looks pretty good for our grip wrap object here. We're going to need to smooth it, of course. But before we do that, let's just select everything from the bottom up right here. So grip wrap 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. And then let's hit Control J to join those objects. All right, and now that's all one object. If we go into edit mode, we can see all the geometry and everything. Let's tab back into our object mode, right click, and hit Shade Smooth. Okay, now we have a pretty decent looking grip wrap object there. All right, let's go ahead and mark. You know what? No, let's not UV unwrap it yet. I want to UV unwrap everything at once, just because it's easier for you to watch and follow along. So we're just going to leave that there for now and move on to our leather object back here. So one thing I noticed while looking around this crossbow is this is really square right here. We might want to smooth that out right there. That transition, it goes straight up and then it's just a sharp curve right in here, or sharp turn. So let's tab into our edit mode. Let's select this whole edge loop here by holding Alt. Double tap G and just move it down a bit like that. Okay, so that's a bit smoother there, and we're going to want to scale it in as well, I believe. So scale it on the x-axis down a bit, something like that. All right, and let's do the same thing for these top pieces here. Scale this guy on the x-axis. Whoops, just move it on the x-axis, not scale it. So GX, bring it in a bit, something like that might be good. That might be too much. Scale, not scale, move it on the x-axis. All right. I think that looks pretty good for that shape there. All right, make sure we didn't affect anything else too poorly, like this handle shape here. Still looks all right. Okay, now that we've got that shape more how we actually want it on the export, we're going to move on to the actual leather wrap object. So it's going to be the same approach as this guy, the exact same approach actually. We're just going to wrap it around the stock instead of the handle. So let's get to it. Start out with box, mesh cube. Let's remove the object here, or I mean the face here. All right, and now let's go ahead and add our loop cuts. Boom, 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 and boom. Whoops. Select all those loop cuts all the way around. Actually, you know what? Let's just select the edges and move them in. That'd be easier than using our two sphere tool. Okay, so now let's just scale this guy on everything except the y-axis. So hit S, Shift Y. Bring these guys in. Now it looks pretty round. Select everything with A. Scale it on the y-axis, bring it down. And I want this to be fairly thin, so something like that might look pretty cool. Now let's move it over. Whoops. I'm going to hit 3 to go into my side view. Hit G, bring it over. All right, now let's scale the whole thing down. Right about there. Move it up on the z-axis a bit. Okay, scale it down a bit more. I want to get it as close as I can to the actual shape here. Move it over a little. Okay, now let's go ahead and apply our modifiers like we did with the grip wrap. So add modifier, we're going to want to subdivide it to give it more edges and verts to work with. Now we're going to go ahead and change our render back down. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and add ourselves a shrink wrap, which is here. All right, set the shrink wrap object to the crossbow body. Then we're going to go ahead and add our solidify. Okay, and change our offset to 1. Make sure our thickness is at 1. Actually, you know what? I think our thickness might be better if we have it turned up a little bit. So turn it up to 2. Since it's supposed to be a leather object, it might look cooler with a more thicker leather. All right, and let's go ahead and turn on those checkboxes. So even thickness and high quality normals. All right, and I think that looks pretty good for that object. Let's see what happens if we add another subdivision. So let's hit turn up the viewport and the render on our subdivision object there, and it does conform much better with a higher subdivision. So let's go ahead and leave that subdivision higher. We can get rid of the excessive edge loops a little bit later on, like we did with these guys over here. All right. So now let's duplicate this object and make some more. Let's rename it first. Actually, rename it to our leather wrap. Whoops, cap locks is on. Leather wrap. All right. And now let's duplicate this object. Let's tab. Looks like we got to center our origin point again. So right click, set origin point to origin to geometry. Now let's duplicate it. So Shift D, move it on the Y axis, bring it over this way, and let's take this guy and rotate it a little bit. I think it might be cool. Have it a little offset, right? So like R, X, rotate it on the X axis. Make it a bit like that. That might be cool. Yeah, maybe move it over a little bit. So GY, over something like that. Okay, let's duplicate this guy again. So Shift D, make another one. Move it on the Y axis. So hit Y. I think I want to center this one here like that, and then rotate it on the X axis even more. So something like that. Make it cross over the other two. GY, bring it over. I think that might be a cool design like that. What happens if I scale it? Maybe just on the Z? No, okay. Let's just leave it how it is, and we can correct the geometry a little bit later, the jagged edges. All right, and I think that looks pretty good. We're going to go ahead and start applying our modifiers now. Okay, so let's apply our subdivision, shrink wrap, and our solidify. Okay, let's do that for each of our objects here. Boom, 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 and boom, boom, boom. Okay, so this one we're going to pretty much keep the same, this middle one. I don't think we have to do a ton of work on this one. Just maybe get rid of the excessive edges here. So hit Control X to dissolve those edges. Let's get rid of this one here. Let's hide our other leather wraps. They're making it a little difficult to see. So the little eye icon. Okay, don't need that edge. Don't need that one or that one. That one's pretty irrelevant. And this one. Let's do the same thing for this side. Okay. Let's hit Control X now that we have all those selected. Get rid of them. Make sure that didn't hurt the shape too much. That looks pretty good. We might even be able to reduce it more. So let's hit this one, hit Control X. Doesn't look bad at all. Let's see this guy. See what happens if we do this. That looks all right still. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's check the inside. Okay, so we do have a bunch of faces in here. So let's select all these. Hit X, get rid of those faces because they're irrelevant. We don't need them. Player will never see those faces. Let's go ahead and do the next leather wrap. Alright, now let's re-enable our first leather wrap here. And let's make sure that this this second one goes over the top of this first one here. So we're going to select these edge loops here. Maybe you know what? Maybe not yet. Let's select the faces inside. Let's select this face here, and bring it down. So GZ, so that it's just on top of that leather wrap. Select this edge here, this one, and this one. Okay, and now let's scale it on the x-axis. So SX, bring it out, something like that. Right, let's do the same for this top part here. Scale it on the x-axis, bring it out, and then let's just smooth that transition. So select these two, scale it on the x-axis, bring it out. Okay, bring it in a little. I think these guys can come in a little as well. And on the X, so they conform to the actual weapon. All right, and I think that looks good for that leather wrap there. Let's move on to our last one. Okay. And this one might take a little bit of extra work here because you can see it's pretty jagged. I don't like that look at all. So we're gonna have to smooth these out. All right. So let's tab into our object mode. Select this guy. Get rid of these edges, of course. We don't need these. Whoops. These three inner ones here. Get rid of these faces. Don't need to be working with those at all. I think maybe we want to select these edges here. Or maybe just this end one right here. And move it along. Yeah, just double tap G and move it along the lines that it's already got. Select them both, hit G, Z, move it up. Alright, that already looks much better right there. Okay. See what happens if we smooth some verts here. I just want to see what happens if we select these, switch to our vertex mode, and then maybe hit Control V, smooth vertices. Alright, that does look much smoother. See what happens if we select the whole thing. Alright, this whole area, let's hit Control V, smooth vertices. That does look better, in my opinion. Okay, let's do that for this top one as well. Hit Control V, smooth vertices. Alright, it did smooth that out a pretty good amount. So now let's just make sure that all of the vertices and all the faces are on top of the actual stock and not clipping through too much. Like I think these top parts here are clipping through a little bit too much. So let's hit GG, bring that guy back down, and then GZ, bring it up. Actually, you know what? Let's move this guy first. Move that back down so it's in about the same position. Now let's move it up. GZ. Okay, those look good. See that bottom piece here. Maybe move these guys down on the z-axis. Oops. Alright, move these guys up a little. That looks good. Okay, now I've got to make sure that all these pieces here are on top of the other leather pieces there. Okay, and you know what? I think it's going to be easier, since there's so many vertices on this one, to just delete one edge or one side and add a mirror modifier. So I'm going to go ahead and hit 7. Then I'm going to select all these faces here on the left side of the leather strap. Let's go into our wireframe mode here, and let's just select in a straight line from the center to the left, like that. All right. You know what? Just change to our face select tool. Sorry. Now we're going to go ahead and select those faces, delete them. All right. And you can see we only have half. If we go back into our solid view mode here, we only have half of this leather object, leather strap object. So we're going to go ahead and add our mirror modifier here. Mirror it on the x-axis. Make sure we have clipping enabled. Okay. And let's make sure these are together. So select that whole edge, hit GX, move it on the x-axis all the way together. Make sure this guy's together as well. It is. All right. So now we're just going to work on the right side here and make sure it's on top of the other leather objects. So let's select this guy here, hit GX, move it out like this. Just do that for all of them. Now you can see we got these spaces here where it's pretty far away from the actual stock of the weapon here, but it's on the inside over here. So now we're going to have to move these faces, or these edges, sorry, outward a little bit, just so they sit on top wherever we need to. So let's hit GX, move it out, and set it up to about right there. And we're just going to do that all the way down this this leather strap here. And that looks pretty good for the for making it conform properly, giving it the right shape, making sure it's not clipping through too many spaces. Let's go ahead and apply that mirror modifier. Oop, we got to go into our object mode and apply that mirror modifier. Now let's tab back into edit mode, because I did notice one thing on the other side here. You can see this strap here is clipping through this strap, so let's just go ahead and move that out just a tad. Select it, GX, move it out here. There we go. That doesn't look too bad. Let's do the same for this area here. Just kind of smooth out that transition now. Okay, that looks pretty good for that leather strap right there. Alright, let's go ahead and select all of our objects now. So select the bottom one. So leather wrap 02, leather wrap 01, and leather wrap, and we're going to join them. So Control J. Alright, and now you can see they're all one object. That looks pretty good. We may want to get rid of some of the geometry here. Or the lines, sorry. So maybe get rid of that one. We still have, oh, looks like we still have all these faces in here that I didn't notice before. Let's go ahead and get rid of those. X, get rid of those faces, reduce the poly count. Let's get rid of these. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's change our shading to smooth now. So right click, shade smooth while we're in object mode. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and add that little metal ring that I was talking about earlier right here. So to do that, we're just going to make sure we're in our object mode, select this guy. Then we're going to go to our, you know what, on second thought, let's just start out with another cube object. Cubes work well for a lot of things. So mesh, cube, okay. Let's scale it down. Move it into position. Bring it over here. Bring it up here. Scale it down a bit more. Okay. And I'm thinking maybe we start out with a thin piece right here, something like that. Yeah, that looks about right. Now let's go ahead and apply our subdivision surface at this point. Change it to 1. All right, and let's turn it off a little bit because we don't need that. We don't need to see that while we're modeling. So let's go ahead and go back into our edit mode. Add a loop cut there. You know what? Let's hit Control Z, get rid of that loop cut. I want to add it closer to the edge. So something like that. Maybe move this face forward a little bit. GY, bring it out. Select these guys. Just like this. And then I'm going to extrude those. All right, and then scale them, right click, deselect, and then scale them on the x-axis to bring them out, like that. And you know what? This is also going to be symmetrical, so I'm just going to completely get rid of the right side here by adding a loop cut in the center, like this. Select all the faces on the right side. Select these guys. All right, let's hit X to get rid of those faces. Get rid of this face as well. Make sure we got rid of everything, and we did. Now we're going to go ahead and add ourselves a mirror modifier. Mirror. I want to move that up so that it's the first modifier here. All right. Now let's rotate this face here 45 degrees. So rotate it on the y-axis 45 degrees. All right. And let's move our face or our edges up so that they snap and they're at the same height as this guy here. So let's use our move tool, GZ, move it up, snap. Like this guy, GZ, move it down, have it snap there. Now let's extrude straight down. So select this face, extrude it on the Z-axis, straight down. Turn off our snapping, we don't want snapping on. Let's see, what's a good size for this? Maybe move it down a bit more. I want it to be kind of big. Now let's go ahead and rotate it again on the y-axis by about another 45 degrees. You know what? We don't even want to rotate it a certain degree. We just want to scale it. It'll be easier. So scale it on the z-axis to 0 to flatten out those faces. All right. Now let's move this guy in. Whoops. This one here. GX, move it in here with our snapping turned on so that it goes straight down. GX. All right, that looks pretty good. And let's go ahead and move this guy up. So double tap G, move it up about like that. All right, and then we're going to extrude this guy in. So extrude along the x-axis right here. Oh, we forgot to turn on clipping on our mirror modifier there. So undo the extrusion, turn on clipping. Now we're going to extrude on the x-axis, bring it in just like that. And I'm going to hit X to delete that face on the inside. All right, now we've got a decent shape for our little ring object here. If we turn on our subdivision surface, we can see it's pretty rounded. And I think we might want to actually move those faces out. So maybe select all these faces here GX, move it out like that, and then maybe move these ones down. So GZ, Z, move it down, something like that. I think that looks pretty good. We do need to increase the thickness, so let's select all these front faces here. Okay, make sure we got all the front ones and move them forward. So GY, increase that thickness. GY, maybe a little bit more. All right, and the inside looks like it's not quite thick enough either. So we're going to select that inside face, hit GX, move it on the X-axis, make sure we have our snapping turned off. I think that looks pretty good for the thickness, right? It's a bit thicker towards the top, so let's move this bottom face up. So GZ. Okay. That looks pretty good. Let's see what happens if we add another loop cut. I think it might look cool with another loop cut here. And then let's go ahead and scale that loop cut on the Z-axis to 0. Make sure it's totally flat. All right. And let's move it out a little bit. So GX, gonna give it a more oval shape. Something like that. All right, I think that looks pretty good. This would be the part of the crossbow that the person steps on when they're pulling back the string. If you don't know how a crossbow is supposed to be used, the stronger crossbows, you kind of point towards the ground. You put this part of the crossbow on the ground, and you step on this ring, and you pull the string back with both arms. So that's what this is going to be used for. We'll probably won't program it that way, but it's just a nice little detail to have on your model. I still haven't decided if we're going to mask this area here. I think we will. It's plenty easy enough to do. So before we go ahead and do that little wrap right here, what we're going to do is we're going to apply our modifiers to this. Okay, so let's just hit apply, switch it to smooth shading like that. That looks pretty good. Don't see any issues with that at all. So let's move on to that wrap object right there. We're going to start out with a cube once again. Shift A, mesh, cube. All right. Let's scale it down a bit. Okay, with this one, we're going to delete a couple different faces. So tab into edit mode. Let's go ahead and delete this face here. Hit X. Delete this face here. Hit X. Let's scale it down on the X-axis. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. Select everything. Scale it down on the X-axis. That. All right. Might have scaled it too much. Scale it back up a little bit. That looks good. Let's move the object over. Position it properly. All right. That looks good. I don't want to move it on the X-axis because I think I want to use a mirror modifier on this guy. So instead what we're going to do is we're just going to position it correctly on the Y and the Z axis. Okay, don't touch the X axis. Make sure it's completely centered. Now let's go ahead and tab into our object mode. Or sorry, our edit mode. Let's move it over on the X axis now by hitting GX. You can see that origin point still over there. That's what we want. Scale it down a bit. Now let's go ahead and apply our modifiers. All right. So add modifier. I'm going to go with a mirror modifier first. So now we've got it over here. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and apply our subdivision surface. And our shrink wrap now. Let's see here. Shrink wrap. Set our shrink wrap object to our bow object, which is right here. All right. And then we had one more. Let's see, we're going to apply our solidify right here. Change our solidify to +1. Thickness is, I think our thickness will be good at 1. We are going to want to apply more subdivision though, because it's not enough with 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase this viewport here to 2, decrease quality to 2 as well. Maybe we want to turn up the thickness to get rid of that. Yeah, I think we want to increase the thickness of our solidify here. And just make things a bit easier. Let's apply our even thickness and our high quality normals. Okay. Now let's go ahead and move our geometry in on the x-axis a bit so that it's just about right there. All right. I think that looks good right there. Let's see here. How do we want to handle this? I think that looks all right just like that. Now we're going to go ahead and apply our modifiers. Let's hit apply. Whoops, sorry. Go into object mode and hit apply on all of them. Oops, what did I do? Oh, I hit apply as shape. Let's just hit apply. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and mess with this geometry a little bit. Get rid of this, just like we did on all the other ones. We just don't need that. Maybe get rid of this, and this, that. Okay, those look pretty good. All right, now let's go ahead and move these guys out a little bit. X, so that it goes along that that crossbow shape rather than through it. All right, we're gonna have to do the same thing for this guy over here as well. Okay, now we need to get rid of the inside here. All these faces aren't needed. And you know what I think might be cool is if we, instead of making these little wrap objects, we make them little metal objects with some little like bolt type things on the texture that go into the crossbow body. So let's see if we can figure out a way to do that. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a loop cut out there. All right. Something like that. Then maybe select all these faces right around here and extrude them out. So maybe have an extrusion, scale it, something like that. All right, scale it on the y-axis now only. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Now we just need to fix the edges here, because you can see they're not quite conformed to the crossbow body. So let's go ahead and fix that. Alright, and I think we may have applied the mirror modifier too quickly now, because we did mess with the geometry a bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete all these faces over here and just apply a second mirror modifier. Oops. If it'll allow me to select these faces. There we go. Alright, there we go. That looks alright. Let's change the shading to smooth. See what that looks like. Shading smooth. Yeah, that looks alright. Okay, so we've got all our little detail objects out of the way here. Now we're going to have to start unwrapping this. Let's see, let's start with the base object here, okay? This one might be a little tougher than anything else we've unwrapped in the past. So let's disable everything except for that body object, so we're just working with that, okay? Let's see how we want to tackle this one. Well, first thing I want to do is apply our modifiers here, just to see what happens with the geometry. Suppose we could get rid of that middle line, or we could use it to unwrap it. And I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to take the easy way out here and just select this middle line, hit E, mark seam, and then we're going to take this middle line, hit E, mark seam. And the reason I'm unwrapping it this way is because I know Steven has Substance Painter, and we can get rid of that seam quite easily with Substance Painter. It's not a huge deal. All right. Control S to save our project. Now let's move on to the next object here, which would be the track. All right. Track shouldn't be too difficult to unwrap. It's a bit of a weird shape, but I think we can get it done fairly easily. All right, so for this guy, we're just going to select all the faces here, hit U, hit Smart UV, and unwrap it that way. I don't think the seams will be a major issue because, again, we have Substance Painter. Also, this is going to be a pretty small object, and the texture we're going to use on it is likely going to be very tileable. So the seams aren't gonna hurt it too much, especially if we use what's called triplanar projection in Substance Painter. Let's move on to our next object now. Go back into our layout. Crossbow body. How about the bow object? Let's do the bow object here. All right. Let's apply our modifier. See what the bow has. Oops. Apply all of our modifiers here. Now let's see what we're working with. I think we can do this one pretty easily as well. I'm gonna go with maybe this line right here. Deselect the inside one. Alright, let's hit E, Control E, mark seam. Let's unwrap that whole object. Unwrap. Let's see what that looks like. Alright, that doesn't look too bad. Move this guy over on the x-axis, center it. Go back here, move on to our next object. Let's see, we did our bow, our arrow track, our body. How about the trigger? Does this guy have any modifiers? He does. It's a mirror modifier and a subdivision that we're going to apply. Okay. I'm going to select this guy. put a seam there, like that seam. Then I'm going to like this here, this here, and that there. Control E, mark seam. Select everything, hit U, unwrap. See what that looks like. Alright, not too bad. Let's move this over here. Maybe move this guy, let's rotate it 90 degrees. Oh, negative 90 degrees. Hit G, move it up. Place them next to each other, center them on the x-axis. And let's move this guy over as well. Right. Move on to the next object, which is, what is this cube object? Ah, here we go. We forgot to rename this guy. Rename it to, let's see here. Let's just call it metal ring. Metal ring. Tab into our edit mode. Actually, you know what? Oh, no, no modifiers. So yeah, tab into our edit mode. Let's put a seam here, mark seam. Okay. Let's mark this seam here. Mark seam. And mark this here. Mark seam. All right, then I'm going to select these edges here. Mark seam. Highlight everything, hit U, unwrap. See what that looks like. And that doesn't look too bad at all. All right, center this guy on the x-axis. Bring this guy up here. And next object. Okay, so we did our crossbow, our trigger. What is this cube object here? Oh, I see. These are, what are we even gonna call these? Bow attachments, maybe? Bow attachers? Bow, bow fixtures. Let's say bow fixtures. Bow fixtures. Right. Tab into our edit mode. See how we're going to handle the unwrap. What is this? Is this an extra loop cut? It is. We don't need those. So let's select these faces here. Hit X, get rid of those faces. That looks pretty good. I just realized we also have our mirror modifier on this, so we're going to get rid of that. We're going to hit apply. All right. Now let's see how we're going to handle the unwrap here. Thinking we might just want to put a line here. I want to see what happens if we just select this line, hit E, mark seam, and then unwrap it. All unwrap. All right, so just kind of unfold it like that. That's not going to be too bad. Let's go back into our layout here. Let's, instead of putting it on the top though, let's go ahead and put that on the bottom. So let's hit Control E, clear seam. Select that one there. Hit E, mark seam, and do the same for this one here. E, mark seam. Let's select all of our faces. U, unwrap. Take a look. All right, those look pretty good. Move them over to the center. Okay, next object. Trigger, grip wrap. Okay, let's take a look at our grip wrap here. this should be pretty simple to unwrap as well. We're just going to have to select our one line along the bottom here. Okay, for all these guys, hit Control E, mark scene, unwrap this guy. Take a look at what that looks like. Looks pretty good. Center everything. G, Z. Whoops, not Z, Y, sorry. This is GY. Move it up on the Y axis. And let's move on to our next object. It's probably the simplest one we're going to have. Oh, scratch that. We have leather wraps. It's going to be basically the same exact thing. Select them. Let's select the bottom edge loops. Right here, and right here. Control E, mark scene. Select everything, and unwrap. Double check it. Looks pretty good. Center it on the x-axis. And do we have any more objects? I think that's all of the objects we need to unwrap. Let's unhide everything first by hitting Alt-H. Hide those reference images, bright pink images. And I'm going to go into my UV editing. Just double check that everything's been unwrapped. Let's see here. That does not look right. Let's see here. This is why this is why we double check things. Let's see. What's going on there? I think it may be this inner area that's causing the issue. Let me hit unwrap one more time. Oh, there we go. I guess I just forgot to unwrap it. Let's see here. Or maybe I unwrapped it before I marked the seams. That would make sense. Now we're going to rotate this guy on the x-axis. Well, we're just going to rotate it about 90 degrees, or 180, sorry, 180. All right, and now let's move this. GX, center it. That looks pretty good. All right, now let's go ahead and double check all of our other stuff to make sure some of those screw ups didn't happen on something else. Select this guy, that looks good. Select this guy, looks good. Looks good. 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 And good. All right. And I think that wraps it up for the crossbow here. We've got our little detail objects, we got our base shape looking pretty good, and we kept the try count pretty low. We're only at about 4,100 tries, which is good for a VR game. So now what you're going to have to do is go through and watch Steven's video for the texturing and then Phil's video for the programming, and after that you should have a working crossbow in VR. See you next time. Laters.
So don't stop, get it, until you're cheddar-headed. Watch the way I navigate.